Okay, so now we'll just have a brief demo on how you can go about setting up your environment, and we'll have a look at the demo for how old school and new school console apps compare and write our first Hello World program. So you're gonna go to the section for Visual Studio. The link should be over here, so you should be able to see it in the left hand side of the bottom. If you click on this, so we'll simply exit this and we should just be able to click on this. We'll go to Visual Studio. You can then go download this. So I've already downloaded this into my local instance. So once you click download, it's going to set up this, and you should just allow it to download the file. So again, you'll see Visual Studio setup, and then we can simply just click on the setup. You'll click yes. Now again, you will just select the instance of what you want, whether it's Visual Studio for Mac or Linux. You'll just decide. Then you just click continue. It will go through and it will set up everything, and because I already have this installed, it's all good. So for example's sake, if you click, once you click install, it should give you something along this line. So these are all the components that I have installed. The most important for this one is just ASP.NET and web development. Just make sure that .NET 8 is installed. It should come by default. Many of the other tools, if you do wish to have them, you can choose that, but at the moment I'm not using any of them. So I'm just using .NET 8 runtime. Just make sure this one has been enabled. This is the most important. Other than that, it doesn't really matter that much. You can choose whatever else you wish to have. Just make sure then you can go and install them. Once that's done, it will run the installation and it will basically install it. Depending on your internet connection, the time can differ. It might take quite a while if your internet is not too fast. But other than that, that will be, it maybe take an hour or so on average, or 30 minutes. Really just depends on your internet speed. Once the installation is complete and you click launch, it's gonna open up a new instance of Visual Studio. So I'll just briefly show you guys quickly. So then you should see a screen like this. These are some past projects that I've done. You're not gonna see any of this because it's not gonna be there. But from this point, you can either go and choose to go and create a new project. Well, at the moment, we're looking at console apps. So your view should look something like this, and then you can just click on this and go through with it. Now I've already prepared something for us, so I'm not going to go through with this, but if you had to go and create one, you would simply click next, give it a name, and then go through next until you finished. Awesome. So now at this point you should be completely done with this, and then so you should get to something like this. Now I've created this already, and I will include it as part of the learning materials as we go through, and put this on GitHub as well so that you can pull it so you can follow along. Now the first and foremost thing that we need to remember here is we see the new school. So new school, you no longer need to have all this code just to print something out. You just need to write console.app. So we'll run this briefly and see on the console there should now be something that's logged here. Here we have our first instance of Hello World. So this is how you can go about, in essence, printing out something in Visual Studio with .NET 8. Then we'll comment this out briefly for a moment, and we'll uncomment the old school version of this. So if you do still see this, this is just the extra code needed to run it, which in essence does exactly the same thing. So this is just the slight differences between the new school and the old school.NET. It's really just a small variant, right? Ultimately, it still remains, the concept still remains the same. Now for a little tour around Visual Studio, as you can see over here, you still have, this is where you execute the program. So you can see here there's a list of different solutions. And to set the solution that you want, you'd simply just click on right click, set as. So when we see this list come up here, there's a few very important things. The first thing is being able to configure the project, setting the startup. You'll also see this NuGet package managers in here, opening the file in an Explorer or terminal, or even being able to publish a specific solution. So if you've built a solution, you can publish it as an exe file, for example, for this, or if it's a website, you can publish the files for it, which basically handles the deployment. So you'll see a few useful things there. So the NuGet package manager is probably the most used one. So this will be used on a more day-to-day basis with all of the different packages that you might want to install, like JSON or Entity Framework, which we'll look at later on what's in the course. Well, there's also different items in here like extensions, where you can go and install your own extensions. If you wish to rebuild the solution, if you click on rebuild solution, it will build everything. So you can see it builds those 3 items. We found 3 successful builds. You can also build it. So every time you make a change and you wish to just build a specific item, you can right click on the specific item and just click rebuild. Then it will rebuild just that specific solution. So that's just something to sort of bear in mind. But yeah, so this is the best part about having .NET 8 and Visual Studio. Some of the other tools like saving it, autosave, these are also very commonly used items. So you can sort of decide like what you wanna use. If you wish to have more detailed info, we'll go through more examples on Visual Studio as we go through later in the course. But the best is to read through what other stuff Visual Studio actually has. It's a very comprehensive IDE. It can be a little bit intimidating when you first reach out and you start out with it, but yeah, it helps to sort of take it in piece by piece. So that's it from Visual Studio. The next thing is Visual Studio Code. So the same process applies here. You would simply just click on Visual Studio Code, and then you would select what instance of what you want. You download it and you'd install it the same way as you would do for Visual Studio. Once it's completed installing, I already have this. If you click open, you would see Visual Studio. So this is an example app in Python, for example, sake that I've built. So Visual Studio Code is very useful when you want to develop in other languages outside of like the .NET space. That's maybe like open source like Python or React or any other language that's not necessarily within the .NET space. It can be useful for .NET projects as well. Here, this is very similar to Visual Studio. It provides all pretty much the same stuff. Visual Studio Code is often very useful if you just want to briefly read through code for a specific item rather than building up the entire solution, or if you want to just run stuff from the command line or build the entire project from the command line rather than building it from Visual Studio itself. Another really cool feature about Visual Studio Code is the search. It's actually very comprehensive, and the extension. So whatever extension, whatever you need, if you see like you can, like, let's say Dart for example sake, or Python or Flutter, there's a range of different things that you can install directly simply by using Visual Studio Code. So this does come in handy sometimes. It really is just an instance of whatever you wish to use. I personally prefer Visual Studio because that's what I find to be the most useful for my development, but you can decide as you need to. In terms of the additional tools, you can install whatever you need. These are optional. You don't have to do it. These will just simply be things that we do use throughout the course. If you have alternatives that you would prefer to use, I encourage you to use that. Whatever makes you feel the most comfortable, I think stick with that. But these are the examples that we will use for the tools in addition to that. And yeah, that's pretty much wraps it up from a demo perspective. I hope to see you in our next course. So thank you for joining me up until the end of this. I will see you in the next module.